Welcome to Toxin Magazine's the Everything Old Skool Podcast. The lead host, Shanique Berg, is unavailable today, but I am your co-host, Marquise Marrow. And I will be conducting this interview with my main man, 50 grand. They call him Mr. Apollo, Billy Mitchell. How are you, sir?
Brother, I am doing really well seeing you, Marquise. We go way back. We like family, man.
Yes, that is true, man. And I appreciate all the love that you showed me and my people throughout the years, sir. It's never forgotten.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Thank you so much, man. This is what we do. We share the love, we share the blessings, and we make the universe work right.
That's how it's supposed to be, sir.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Indeed. Um, Introducing again, Mr. Apollo, Billy Mitchell. This is the Toxin Magazine, the Everything Old Skool Podcast, and your lead host, Shanique Bird, isn't available, and I will repeat it. I am the co-host, Marquise Marrow. So, my brother.
Yes, sir.
They call you Mr. Apollo.
That's what they call.
Now, I know you got books. I know you presented Grammys to Megan Thee Stallion and Beyonce. But before we go there, I want to lead up to it,
Yes, sir. Yes,
how did you get the name Mr. Apollo, and who gave it to you?
Well, the name Mr. Apollo was bestowed on me by the people of Harlem. And they started calling me Mr. Apollo. I've never called myself that. That's why the title of my autobiography is called They Call Me Mr. Apollo. I'm Billy Mitchell. I know who I am, but I wear that title with a lot of pride because it comes from the people, and the reason why I think they started calling me that is because of all the years that I worked at the Apollo and all the positions that I've held over the years at the Apollo Theater. So the kids, I would see the kids in the street, and it started way back, I think in 2006 or 2005. And I would see the kids in the street and they, hey, Mr. Apollo, because I used to coordinate a program at the Apollo Theater where we brought kids from the community and from the housing projects and from the shelters, and we would bring them to the Apollo Theater to see movies free of charge. It's a program that I coordinated with all the major movie studios, Disney's and Viacom and all. So whenever a new movie came out that was kid relevant, they would give it to the Apollo Theater and we would show it to the kids in the community. And the thing about it, it was funded by Lehman Brothers, the big financial corporation who eventually they went bankrupt. And that's why we couldn't continue the program, but they would provide funding so we could have someone run the projector. We would invite the kids. It was free of charge. And we did that for years. So when I would see the kids in the street, Mr. Apollo, when's the next movie going to be coming out? And that's where the name stuck, and the management of the Apollo started referring to me as Mr. Apollo, and it's just something that stuck.
It just caught on, huh? So that's genuine love when the hood gives it to you.
Brother, ain't nothing like, getting the love from the hood. When you get that sure enough genuine love from the hood, you receive it and you wear it as a crown, as a badge of honor. And that's how that came about. And people started calling me Mr. Apollo. Then the media picked it up. And before you know it, I'm known as Mr. Apollo all over the world.
Literally all over the world.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, some people might call it the hood. Some people might call it the inner city, but It's all the same thing.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Now, you mentioned your book.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I wanted to know is, at what moment decided you wanted to write a book, or what incident happened that clicked something in your mind and said, you know what, I need to document these things. Yeah. So when was the moment that you decided I need to write a book?
Well, over the years, people, being that I've been at the Apollo Theater, I've held many positions, from ushers to maintenance to security to manager of the gift shop to producing amateur night to producing shows at the Apollo Theater. So what happened was, over time, people said, man, you need to write a book about your time at the Apollo, yada, yada. And people kept saying that to me. And I ain't gonna front. I would say, nah, I ain't gonna write no book. Nobody know who I am. Nobody cares. Why would I write a book? And besides, I don't even know how to write a book. I had no idea about how to write a book. And then back in 2012, the Apollo gets a call from the White House saying that
The
Michelle
White House? Wow.
White House saying that Michelle Obama was coming to New York and she wanted to come by the Apollo Theater with her mother, her daughter, and some friends to do a little tour. So I had created the Apollo Theater tours way back in 1992. So I was the one that was able to give the history of the theater, yada, yada. So anyway, I'm taking Miss Obama around and we just kicking it, like, brother and sister, man, because she's real. She, even though was the first, first lady of the United States of America, she's a sister from Chicago. So we kicking it, we singing Temptation song, My Girl on the stage, the Apollo, just rocking it. And Sasha Malia, they were little kids then. They were on the stage, singing to Mary Mary's Shackles on My Feet So I Can Dance. And they were killing it, right? So when the tour was over, I had taken Miss Obama around the dress rooms and sharing, my limited knowledge of the theater. She said, "You need to write a book." And I said, "Damn, people have been telling me that, right?"
You said that?
Yeah, she said, "You need to write a book." But I don't know whether she said it, as a complimentary thing. Sometimes people say things just to, to give you love. But I took it to heart, right? And I said, "Man, if she thinks I should write a book, maybe I should write my autobiography," because I have a story, but my story is not necessarily unlike other people's story, but it is a little different than most people think, because people look at me as one thing, but they don't know my background, right? Mm-hmm. So what happened was I contacted a friend of mine by the name of Herb Boyd. He's the leading editor of the Amsterdam News. He's written, a dozen books, bestsellers. So I said, "Yo, Herb, I'm thinking about writing my autobiography, man, and I don't know how to do it, man. And I don't want to I want to self-publish because I don't think any publishing company would want to, buy it because, who are you? You're nobody, so I figure I'll do it and self-publish myself." So I said, "How do I begin?" He just sit down and just start writing. And for about a year, Marquise, I just started writing stuff about my life, with my situations, about this and about that. And I handed him the manuscript and he started reading. He says, "Man, I gotta put what you wrote down into context because you're jumping all over the place, right?" And he said, "People won't believe some of the things that you experience, but you need to have some photos in the book talking about your experiences, photo of people that you're throwing out names, and the average people say, yeah, he just front, he don't know these people, blah, blah, blah." So he says, "You need to put some photos." So I went home and I started looking for photos that corresponded with my narrative in the book. And I came out and I gave him the photos and he put it together. We hired this editor by the name of, shout out to Darlene Gist. She edited the book for me. We worked on the cover and we came out with the book and we said, "What are you going to call it?" I said, "Well, they call me Mr. Apollo, so that's what I want to call it." They call me Mr. Apollo. And that was back in 2010. The book has been well received. I've sold lots of copies, but some of the proceeds from the book goes to this organization that I sponsor in kids. It's a basketball program called Playing on the Edge Basketball Program. And I've been down with them and given proceeds for the last 9 years. And because I've always wanted to mentor kids, right? I was born and raised in Mount Vernon, right? And my refuge, the place that I received mentorship as a kid, was the Mount Vernon South Side Boys Club, right?
Lowe's Moore, respect.
Oh man, I'm a boys club head till I die, because that's where I got my roots. I played football for the boys club, won MVP one year. And that was the year that the New York Giants had a quarterback called Y.A. Tittle. And at the banquet for the football team, we had a little banquet and they presented with my MVP trophy. So I got a picture in the Mount Vernon newspaper with Y.A. Tittle and some city officials handing me my trophy, man. And I was like maybe 13 or 14 years old, And
what position did you play?
I played, believe it or not, as small as I am, and I'm a little dude, right? But I got a big heart. I played defensive guard because I really tried out to be a running back because I was fast, right? I was fast. I could, but I didn't know how to the plays. I knew how to play football, but they, the coach would say, we're going to do play 24, and I didn't know none of that stuff, right? So they said,
Right.
with your heart, we're going to put you on the line. And I would come up and I would just rip through the lines and just sack all these kids, man. And I gained a little bit of a rep back in the days when in Mount Vernon for winning MVP, and that was like from the Southside Boys Club. I'm part of the alumni committee, and that's my family. I mentor kids in Harlem. I'm joining this group Friday to meet with them to be on their board for this other youth organization that I want to be a part of, the mentor. So it's about giving back, man. You get to a position in your life, even if it's not a high position, but you always got to give back to the community. That I think that is a must. I don't think that we do that enough for the kids. And then we always complain about why they doing this, why they acting up, why, sometimes they just need a little love, man. They may not get it at home because my father wasn't there, even though my mother had 14 children. My mother eventually had 14 children. There wasn't a time that we were all in the house at the same time. I was in foster care, taken out of my home in Mount Vernon when I was a little boy. 8 years old, me and my brothers were put in foster cares. My father took a couple of my sisters, 3 of my sisters, he left the crib. My mother had a couple with her, and I was in foster care for a few years before my mom was able to bring us back to Mount Vernon. And then we moved to the South Bronx. And that's when I started running errands for the Apollo Theater in 1965.
Wow, 1960. That's 55 years, 56 years.
Exactly.
I wasn't even an idea.
You weren't, and that was a few years before I met your dad and your grandparents and your uncles and aunts. I met them in 1968 when I first met your grandparents, your father, your uncles, and your aunts, and your Uncle Ed is one of my dogs. Me and your Uncle Ed is like, we ride or die. Our journeys have, taken different paths and whatnot. But we always keep in contact. He's my boy. He's my dude. We go way back. I have about 7 guys that are part of my nucleus of friends, unconditional, right? Unconditional. And no matter whether we hang out or see each other, these are my brothers, and your Uncle Ed is one of those. Your dad was one of the coolest cats I ever seen on this planet.
Man, I could dig it.
Matthew was so smooth, so smooth. He was one that we always looked up to because Matthew had that house up in Rye,
No, Nyack.
Nyack, there you go, Nyack. Up in Nyack, and we were still down in the South Bronx, and and Matthew would come down, hang out a little bit with his brothers and us, and he would go back to you and your family.
So what I wanted to ask you also, and thank you for the generational love. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned about your book and the pictures. Now I'm a witness because I seen pictures with you with Smokey Robinson.
Yes, sir.
I seen pictures with you with James Brown.
Yes, sir.
Now, I want you to tell the audience how you were so tight with James Brown that he paid for your college.
Yeah. When I used to
Am I right about it?
Yeah. When I used to run errands for Mr. Brown, I always tell people, Mr. Brown, whenever I would see him, and he would always say to me, Mr. Billy, because he always called me Mr. And as a young kid, you're like, why is this dude calling me Mr.? He's Mr. Brown. This is Mr. So-and-so. He was always calling, he said, Mr. Billy, how you doing in school? Whenever I would see him at the Apollo, and that was because he performed Apollo a lot back then. And I knew if I wanted some cash, I could leave the Bronx and go back down to Apollo, hang out backstage and run errands for him and his band and whoever was on the show. So after I would see Mr. Brown, and each time I saw him, how you doing in school, son? Oh, and I always say, I'm doing good, Mr. B, I'm doing good. And next time, how you doing in school? I'm doing great, and I kept telling him that every time I saw him. But apparently he didn't believe me, bro, because one day, James Brown made me leave the Apollo, go all the way back to the South Bronx and get my report card and bring it back and show it to him. And the fact of the matter at that time, Marquis, I wasn't doing well in school at all. My family had just moved from Mount Vernon to the South Bronx. I wasn't familiar with the kids. I wasn't dressing like the kids from, from the Bronx and Manhattan. So I was bullied and I was teased by my classmates, right? They used to call me Stinky Boy because my hygiene wasn't up. That was just a thing with my family. We didn't clean. We didn't wash up enough, and our clothes was dirty. We wore the same stuff because that's just the way my family was. So anyway, with that bullying of the classmates, in the classroom, I wasn't paying attention to what the teacher was teaching. And I would never raise my hand and ask her to explain stuff to me that I didn't understand. And as a result of that, when it was time to take the test, I failed all my tests. So I remember taking the report card to James Brown, and he noticed that I had failed all the tests. And James Brown told me that I was never allowed to come back to the Apollo Theater, run errands, and make those tips until I can prove by the next report card that my grades had gone up. And I was so scared because I knew if I didn't run errands, I wasn't going to get that money I needed to help my mother out or to go buy a new shirt or some new pants or the new sneakers. So I said, damn, I got to go to school, man. I got to start raising my hand and ask teacher to explain it. And that's what I did. The day after he threatened me, I went to school the next day. I started saying, excuse me, miss, could you go over that again for me, please? And bro, I was cognizant of my classmates watching me, right? And I thought they were going to laugh at me or call me stupid because they was always calling me Stinky Boy and stuff. So I thought they were going to now call me stupid Stinky Boy. You don't know that stuff. But I found out, check this out. I found out that some of my classmates, they didn't understand what the teacher was teaching either. So by me raising my hand, it gave them more or less the courage to start raising their hand and ask for questions. And before you know it, everybody in the class started asking for help. So I started understanding the lessons. I applied it to my tests and my grades went up and up and up. Before you know it, I was a member of the honor roll. And then when I kept going to school and doing well in school because those marks started getting good to me, right? And when I finally graduated from high school, I remember James Brown doing a show at the Apollo. I told him that I had graduated. He says, man, I am so proud of you. I told you education is so important. He says, so what you gonna do now? I said, well, sir, I want to go to business school because my oldest brother was in business. I want to be like him so bad. I said, I want to go to business school. And he says, well, how you going to do? You got money for it? I said, sir, no, I'll try to find it some way. And he reached in his pocket, Marquise, and he pulled out this knot, man, and he started peeling off money, right? Now, I had already been saving some money that Marvin Gaye had given me, right? Because I wanted to enroll in this business school. So I was putting that money aside and I had it stashed in a box, right? So along with the money that I saved from Marvin Gaye and the money that James Brown gave me, I enrolled in a business school on 23rd Street and Lexington Avenue. And that was in 1971. I studied credit analyst and collection management. And that's how it all started. It was due to James Brown and Marvin Gaye giving me the money.
That's amazing. So how did you even become an errand runner at the Apollo? How did that even come about?
Good question. My mother was born in Harlem, right, in 1923. Now, when we had moved from Mount Vernon to the South Bronx, there was a couple of days we had no food in the house. My mother had no money. The check hadn't come in, the welfare check hadn't come in. So she sends me down to Harlem to borrow some money from her cousin. My mom's cousin lived directly across the street from the backstage door of the Apollo Theater. Now it's a schoolyard, but back in the old days, it was a row of buildings. So when I went to her cousin to get the money, the cousin wasn't home. I said, oh, snap. Man, I can't go home without this money. Mommy needed for the food and stuff like that. So I had to wait till my mom's cousin got home. So I started walking up and down 126th Street. I finally crossed to the side of the Apollo Theater. I'm looking up at the building and the door of the Apollo opens up. I'm sure how the creator works. The door of the Apollo opens up and Frank Schiffman, Jewish brother who owned the theater back then, he opened up the door and he says, hey, kid, what are you doing back here? I said, I'm not doing nothing, mister. I'm just waiting for my mom's cousin. She lived across the street. He says, okay, well, while you're waiting, you want to make some money? And I got scared because I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. I thought he was trying to make a move on your brother, right? Could you imagine an old white dude say, hey, kid, you want to make some money? So
especially back then.
Yeah, man. I was saying, man, what's this dude trying to do? So he said, he calmed me down. I said, no, I just want you to go to the store for some people that are rehearsing for a big show tonight. They need somebody to go get their coffee and their newspapers and their shoes shine and their clothes pressed. And kid, if you run these errands, they'll give you a little tip. And that's when I started running errands at the Apollo Theater. I would rush back real quick because they always gave me good tips. You know, I would go and run, come right back. Then he allowed me to come back after school to run errands on the weekends. And before you know it, whenever I needed some money, I would go and camp out and post up behind the Apollo Theater backstage door. And that's how it all started in 1965, bro.
Wow, and that says a lot for your character. You know, they especially being a young black boy back then, and he trusted you. You came back, you did what they had to do, and not only that, you've been there 55 years. So that says a lot for your character, man.
Yeah, well, brother, you know, it hasn't been 55 years straight, you know, but it started 55 years ago. It's been straight for the last 35 years because I started running errands in the 60s. I did that from 1965 to about maybe 1967. And then I would come to the Apollo in the early 70s to see concerts because I was working then, you know, I had a different job. I had hooked up my a shorty, you know, and so I wasn't running errands, but I was still coming to the Apollo. And then the theater closed in 1977. The Schiffman family shut down the theater in 1977. And everybody in Harlem and everybody in the world thought the theater would never open up again. And then there was a man that I used to admire all the time. His name was Percy Sutton. And he opened up the theater in 1980. He bought the theater in 1981. And he hired a couple of my brothers and my brother-in-law to be a part of the construction crew to renovate the theater, right? And then they said they're going to reopen and they're looking for people to work at the opening up the Apollo. So by then I was working in a bank. I was a banker at the time, but I needed a part-time job because I was used to hustling, right? So I said, I'm gonna hustle, give me a part-time job at the Apollo. So I go there, I applied for a job. All the administrative jobs were taken. And the only position they had in 1985 for me was as an usher. And I became an usher at the Apollo part-time. They liked the way I moved and grooved and spoke and whatnot. So they made me the manager of the ushers. And that was the start. And then that, you know, they give me opportunities and I just started growing up and now I'm part of management at the Apollo Theater.
And there you go. It's that character again. That paid off for you. So wait. Yes, sir.
When I was growing up in Mount Vernon, man, you know, that's what we did. I had a paper route, you know, when I was 11, 12 years old, getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning. This guy named George Jugalo, may he rest in peace. I'm sure he's not alive, but George Jugalo would get some of the kids from Mount Vernon, 3 o'clock in the morning. It was dark out. He would put us in the truck. We would go out to Yonkers, to this garage, and we would put together the daily news, the different advertisement, all that, and fold the news up, and then put them in big bags and have these bags. And 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning, we throw in newspapers on people's porches. It was dark, their dogs chasing us. And so I was used to doing that and hustling. And I used to go shine shoes in bars in Mount Vernon when I was a kid. So when I came down to Apollo Theater, I was used to running errands and making money because nobody was giving us anything. I found out at an early age that you're not going to be given anything. You have to go out and work for what you want.
Yes, sir.
If you get stuck with people giving you stuff, you're going to be stuck with people giving you stuff. And one day they ain't going to give you jack. And then what are you going to do? So I always had me a couple of hustles, even to this day, man. I got a couple of ways of getting some paper because I have a large family, and you know, family there's always needs. So you know, I do what I got to do.
So back then in 1965, what was the Apollo always for Black entertainers? What was it in the beginning?
Yeah, well, the building, just so that the people know. The building itself was built in 1914, right? The building that we know as the Apollo, but it wasn't called the Apollo Theater. The building was built in 1914 as a segregated burlesque house. Segregated meaning that Black folks weren't allowed to come in to sit down and see shows or perform on the stage. The building was originally called Hertig and Siemens New Burlesque Theater, right? It was all white. Blacks were not allowed in. And it wasn't necessarily because people didn't like us. The reason why Blacks weren't allowed in the building in 1914 is because Harlem was different back then. See, the Harlem that we know right now was different in 1914 and prior. Harlem was first a community where if Europeans migrated from wherever they came from and they decided to come to New York, most Europeans or white brothers and sisters, they would move into areas where people shared the same culture, spoke the same language, cooked the same food. So the west side of Harlem was all Irish back in 1914. The east side of Harlem was all Italian and Latino. Now, where the Apollo Theater is located right now, that area was first all Dutch and Jewish. See, the word Harlem is Dutch. There's a city in the Netherlands called Harlem, but it's spelled Haarlem. Now, back in 1914 and prior, African Americans, we lived further downtown in Lower Manhattan, where now is the World Trade Center area and Wall Street. You know, that's where blacks first lived. We weren't allowed up in Harlem. Harlem's for white folks. So as they started moving out of Harlem in the 1940s and left those buildings, those projects that were originally built for white servicemen coming home, and they didn't want to live in there, so they started moving out to the suburbs. So this brother named Philip Payton started buying property in Harlem in the 1920s. And he started selling these buildings or renting these buildings to black people. And the whites that were living in Harlem, they got pissed. So they started moving out of that street, and then they would move to the suburbs. So Philip Payton started buying buildings on Lenox and 133rd Street, and he started filling up with blacks. Then he started buying buildings on St. Nicholas, started filling up. Before you know it, blacks started moving into Harlem. And then all of a sudden, during the period they called the Great Migration, African Americans started moving from the South, from the Midwest, from the Caribbean, from Africa, and they all moved to Harlem. And we brought our culture, our vibe, our spirit to that community. And whites started moving out, you know. But as we can see right now with gentrification coming around, they're moving back in. You know,
full circle.
Full circle. So people got to understand, you know, even though we love Harlem, we it's dear to us. We first lived downtown in Lower Manhattan, and the proof of that is, if you remember, in 1991, they were digging down near the World Trade Center to build this government building called the General Services Building. And as they're digging up the ground, they found the remains of 20,000 enslaved Africans.
I remember that.
So being in activism back then and an actor, and all of us in the arts and activism, we found the remains, we said, whoa, y'all gonna build this government building on top? Our people, you must be out of your damn mind. And we pressured the government, and before you know it, they allowed Howard University to do this excavation. And they dug up the remains, and they let us ship most remains back to Africa so that their souls can rest in peace in the home they were stolen from. And then some of the remains that they found, they says, okay, we said, don't touch them. And they said, okay, what are we gonna do? We said, well, let us have a part of this land, and we're gonna build the African burial ground. And before you know, they started building all these buildings around the African burial ground, the city hall and all, you know, Wall Street, all that, the World Trade. But
right.
That port was where the Dutch would bring our enslaved brothers and sisters and sell them back then. See, the island we call Manhattan was originally the land of Indians. They call it Manhattan. See that, so the Dutch and the British that came and took over, they started calling Manhattan. But before then, they called it New Amsterdam because, you know, and because the Dutch had to deal with the British to bring enslaved Africans to the Manhattan, they had to deal with the British government. So they started, he was part of the British government, I mean, the British monarchy. He was a lord, his name was Lord York. So they started naming this area New York.
Right.
That's where all this comes from, bro. Folks got to know the origins of everything. We hear these names, you know, because can you imagine, Manhattan was really an island by Indians called Manhattan. You know,
that's
blacks
deep.
Blacks didn't always live in Harlem. You know, as I got older, I started, you know, doing research on who we are as a people. Last year I went to Africa, you know, first time in my life. Me and a group of people from Mount Vernon, from my hometown, about 25 of us, man, cats and ladies that I haven't seen in years. The Creator brought us together, and we said, we're going to take a trip back home and let the ancestors who were able to make it across the passages. Somebody in my family was on those slave ships and was able to make it to this land and procreate so I can be here right now. Somebody from, well, your ancestry, you're Native Indian. You know, your ancestry is Native Indian.
Oh, you know that, huh?
Oh, of course I know. Listen, listen. If you look at your grandmother, your grandfather, your dad, his siblings, you can see the features.
Yeah.
Your aunts have long, straight Indian hair. Your brother, your Uncle Ed, Indians have a pointy nose. You can see the features, in your family. But there's some African in there, somebody that, because when they first enslaved us and took over the Indians' land, they would let the Indians and the enslaved Africans, mingle. And
Right.
that's where a lot of our children, because you hear a lot of people say, yeah, I got Indian in me. Yeah, you probably do. You probably got some white in you too,
Yeah. So this is what I wanted to ask you, because you're a walking almanac. I never knew that much about the Apollo, and this is perfect for the Everything Old Skool podcast. Because you can't get no more old school than this.
Yeah, man. I mean, talk about old school. I remember when the hip hop generation. I remember when they first started rocking the Apollo stage. First group to hit the stage was Run DMC. The first rap group to hit the stage, the Apollo was running them. And before you know it, a lady named Mary Flowers, who was the controller for the Apollo, and she was the controller for Inner City Broadcasting, that WBLS and whatnot.
Right.
She started bringing concerts to the Apollo, and nobody had heard about this guy named Jay-Z. Nobody had heard about this guy named Nas. Nobody heard about Rakim and whatnot. She was the first to bring these dudes to the Apollo in concert.
But that wasn't that long ago. So they didn't.
It wasn't, man. I remember when hip hop first started. I remember when hip hop first started in the Bronx on Cedric Avenue. We used to go to a club on Jerome Avenue called The Fever back in the day. And my man, Chris Parker, KRS-One, him and his boy, they were like my favorites. A kid named Scott LaRock, right? And they would be at the Fever, doing their thing with Kool Herc and all of those guys. And back in the day, it was, and you see the involvement of hip hop, because it was hip hop derived from, we used to have a lot of gangs in the Bronx, and gangs in Manhattan, right? And instead of these brothers started, stabbing each other up and fighting each other, they started rhyming battles, or they would do break dance battles, and before they started doing it, and before it came a culture with the hat on the side, and the baggy pants, instead of putting up those dukes, they said, we're gonna battle you doing hip hop. And then the DJs started having block parties. They'll bring out the turntables and see who's the nicest on the mic and whatnot. And all of a sudden, this culture came out, man, of poetry and telling our story through hip hop.
And I'm glad you brought up hip hop, because this leads to my next question. How in the world did it come about? Because I was watching the Grammys this year, my brother.
Yes, sir.
And I seen you present the Grammy to Megan Thee Stallion and Beyonce.
Yes, sir.
Now, before I move forward with that question, when Apollo opens back up, because you're that bridge, if you bring Megan Thee Stallion and Beyonce to the Apollo, do you know how crazy that line that it will be? It will be all the way from the east side to the west side. Did you ever think about bringing them?
Well, we think about bringing a lot of people, but you got to understand, the Apollo Theater is one of the smallest venues, not only in New York, but in the country. We only have 1,500 seats. See, most venues like the Beacon Theater or the Madison Square Garden or the Barclay or King's Theater, they have thousands of seats. So in order to bring acts like Beyonce or whatever, some promoter has to rent out the theater and bring those acts there. The Apollo really, not anymore. We don't produce concerts. Somebody rents out the theater, brings the shows there. They charge whatever they want. But if you only have 1,500 seats, and you got to pay Beyonce the bag that she wants, Megan Thee Stallion the bag that she wants,
you got to charge $250 a ticket.
At least $500 a ticket for the way up on top, man. For one show. So you can't afford those acts. So what people do, like since we were shut down because of COVID, there have been people who've rented out the Apollo Theater and done concerts that they streamed. The Roots did it, D'Angelo did it, Busta Rhymes did it, you know, and a couple others. They've done concerts with no audience. No audience. So we are planning, depending on the city and state, how they, you know, deal with these COVID restrictions, et cetera. The Apollo Theater will be back open, but things will change. You know, they want a lot of places open back up in full 100% capacity. I don't make those decisions for the Apollo Theater. My paycheck is not in that range. Those decisions are made by the higher ups, right? But I know
Right.
we do plan on opening up. But in the interim, instead of me doing my normal tours of the theater that I do daily, I've created this virtual tour that we are about to roll out next month to the public. We've been doing it since February for corporations, colleges, and whatnot, but we're going to roll out to the public where I take people around the theater, I show them images, we see videos, old footage and stuff, and I just, you know, narrate the story of the Apollo Theater. So it's something that I enjoy doing. I love talking about the Apollo because there's so many stories out there about the Apollo, who did this, what did happen at the Apollo. And I only share my truth. And if I don't know something about the Apollo, I'll be the first to tell you, I don't know nothing about that, you know? And there have been times I had to turn down interviews, you know, major media, because I can't speak about Billie Holiday. I never saw Billie Holiday in concert. I can't speak about Ella Fitzgerald. I've never seen Ella Fitzgerald in concert. I can tell
Right.
you what I saw, you know, and that's what but you know, a lot of times people say, man, do you want to know about the Apollo Theater, man? Just go ask Billy Mitchell. I don't know everything, man, but I know what I know.
Yeah. Now, how did it come about that you presented the 2021 Grammys to Megan Thee Stallion and Beyonce? I mean, out of all of the people in the world, it must be an honor. How did they choose Billy Mitchell?
Brother, let me tell you, when people started getting on the Grammys saying that you know, they weren't black enough, they weren't inclusive enough. But what happened because of COVID, a lot of venues that were well known had to be shut down. So what the Grammy people did said, we're going to talk about 3 different venues that were shut down, 3 major venues, and we're going to have representatives from those venues talk about what they've been doing since COVID, and then we'll have somebody from that venue represent an award. So what they did is they got the Apollo Theater in New York, they got the Troubadour in LA, and they got this other theater in Nashville, Tennessee, you know, country western. So they got different people from those venues. And when they reached out to the Apollo, management said, can nobody represent us like Billy Mitchell? And the producer said, that's who we wanted. We just want to make sure. So they reached out to me and they said, Billy, we want you to present 3 Grammys this year on the award. We want you to produce present Song of the Year, Best R&B, and Best Rap Collabo. So I said, cool, man. You know, I said, thank you. It's an honor, you know, because, you know, I mean, I'm just a regular dude, and normally presenters on the Grammys are usually some celebrity person, right? So let's keep it real. So when they reached out to me, I was totally honored. And then I got a call from the producer, executive producer, saying, Billy, you know, we're going to change things a little bit. So I said, okay, they're not going to use me, which is cool. The fact that, but he says, no, what we want to do is we're trying to get Anderson .Paak and Bruno Mars to do a little set for us. And if they agree, would you mind not presenting 3 awards? Could you just present 1 and we'll do a story on you for the, you know, rest? So I said, yeah, that's a better look, because I want people to know who I am, because I'm trying to make some moves. And if I get more visibility out there, it'll be a good look for me, right? So
Indeed.
I decided,
I said, indeed.
yeah. So when they said, we want you to present best rap and collaboration, I said, bet. So when it came down to, they gave me all the people that were in the category. So I had to read up all these different names, you know, several times. And then I didn't know who the winner was going to be. So then on the night of the event, they said, and they did the story on me. And then they says, now back to Billy Mitchell. And I said, the winner for best R&B and rap is Megan Thee Stallion, Savage, featuring Beyonce, and that's how it happened, man.
That's deep. I didn't know they did it. I don't remember seeing the little article or piece about you.
Oh yeah, man. They did a real nice little story on me, man. My phone, and I'm not exaggerating. When it came on, my phone kept ringing every minute for the next day and a half. Phone calls, text messages from people that I don't even know, celebrities that I've never met in my life, congratulating. It was just. I was so grateful, Marquise, man. Hey, I'm this dude from Mount Vernon, bro, with that Harlem spirit and Harlem soul, and to be getting this kind of accolades was just I'm so grateful, man. You have no idea.
Right. The 2021 Grammy Awards honored Mr. Billy Mitchell, Mr. Apollo. So for everybody watching, Google that.
Google it. You'll see.
Now, I also wanted to ask you, because you somebody when you have a mural, a drawing on the wall in Harlem.
Yeah, man.
So I know you have a painting, a mural. Am I saying that right?
It's a mural. A mural.
Yeah. Mural.
Yes.
So how did that come about, and who knew and who respected your accomplishments enough for the Harlem community, and as well as the Apollo, to want to put a mural on the wall for you, and who did it, and how long ago?
Right. The mural's been up for about, oh God, at least 8 years, maybe 9 years. This organization called Creative Arts. They have a program where young kids are artists, in drawing and painting and whatnot. And they had come to the Apollo Theater and had given them a tour. And I just started talking to them about, life and dropping some science on them. And then they eventually asked me to come by their place and talk to the kids every now and then. So I started doing that. And the executive producer one day contacted me and said, man, you made such an impact on these kids. They're constantly talking about you. And so they were going to have this program, months later, they're going to have the program, and they invited me to come down. So I go down there, and the people were standing outside this building, the PAL building on 119th Street and Manhattan Avenue, right? So,
yes, sir.
So they're standing out there, and people are milling around, and they're going inside, and I go inside the building, and I noticed that people always, escort me different places. And I'm saying, why they escort me? I usually make my moves. So they want to make sure that I wasn't noticing what was going on outside. So we get outside, and people are making these presentations and whatnot, and you see this brown, paper bag material on the wall of this building. So they said, ladies and gentlemen, we want to unveil our new work that the kids put together. They've been working on this for months to honor this young man that they really appreciate. And they pulled the painting down, and there was my mural up there, man. That looked just like me. That looked just like me. And they had something that, and they had above me, they had Harriet Tubman, Muhammad Ali, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and all these brothers and sisters. And they had me talking to a young kid with a book in my hand, talking about education. And apparently they took a picture of me when they came to the Apollo, because I had on a brown suit and my glasses. If you look at the mural, it looks just like me. And man, Marquise, I just cried and cried. I couldn't believe that these people honor me on the wall of a building. And I remember one day taking my 2-year-old granddaughter there, and taking a picture. I said, look at Papa on the wall. I made sure my daughter took a picture of that. So if you're ever on 119th Street and Manhattan Avenue, on the side of the wall of the PAL, you'll see the mural with your boy. And it's just life has been so good, man. You never know how your journey is going to be in life. You just have to walk with a lot of consciousness. You have to always praise the creator, so he can guide you. I feel you always have to be good. I never had a beef with anybody, not even, he's throw these knuckles. I'm not a violent dude, but I'm very protective of my family. I will go there if necessary, but I've never had to do that except one time. These dudes came after my brother, and me and your uncle, and we we
Do
had
what you had to do, huh?
we had to fortify the fort. We had blocks ready with dudes coming. They had shot up my mom's crib, looking for my brother, and they
Oh,
said
wow.
he was coming back that night, and they came back, and I had people on the roofs and cars and hallways and alleyways just waiting.
We don't want to see that side of Billy Mitchell.
Brother,
You had the whole block ready, huh?
yes, and that was way back in the 70s. That I was just afraid for my family because
Boston Road.
no, but this is I was living on Boston Road. My mom and them lived on Washington Avenue, in 166th Street, and my brother was out there, and he owed his cat some money, and they came looking to collect, and my brother cracked him in the head with a Pepsi bottle, and they came back, and luckily that my brother owed the money to, I knew his brother who was the head man. So I called him. I said, "Yo, man, I know so and so is your brother. Man, they just shot up my mom's crib." He said, "Who's looking for my brother?" He said, "Who's your brother?" I said, "Blah blah blah." "That's your brother?" I said, "That's my little brother, man." He said, "Don't worry about it. I'll squash this." I said, "Please do, man, because it was getting ready to get real ill out here." He said, "No, don't worry about it. I know that was your brother,
Right.
That's how it
And
happened.
I see, man. There's many layers to you, man.
There's
Many
many
layers.
ways to everybody, and we all evolve, we all grow. I found out that violence against another Black man is just not with me. I can't see myself. I will walk away. I'll be called a punk, which I have been called. I'm not gonna fight a brother, man. We catching hell as it is. And for another brother to fight another brother, that's why my spirit is at unease right now when I hear about all these brothers and sisters in our own community that are harming each other, man.
I
That
hear you, man.
drives me crazy.
Let me ask you this, brother.
Hmm.
Out of all these years, what is your most memorable moment at the Apollo? I'm sure you got 100 of them.
I do.
But
I have so many. Aside from meeting Miss Obama, again, the first African American first lady in the history of the United States. That was one. Another moment was, and see, I don't like dropping names but it's part of my journey. I was born and raised in Mount Vernon, right? One of my boys coming up was Denzel Washington, right? That's how I got into theater and started doing films, trying to be like Denzel when I was younger, right? And I remember one day we were having a concert at the Apollo, and Denzel was in town. This was years ago, right? And it was Earth, Wind, and Fire and Stevie Wonder on one bill at the Apollo. Those are my favorite. That's my favorite band, my first artist. Denzel was in town, so I called him and said, "Yo, man, you want to hang out, man?" He said, "Yeah, man." And his wife was in town with him, so we get together with my wife, Denzel, and his wife Pauletta. And I told management that Denzel was coming. They said, "Billy, take the day off. That's your boy." So we get box seats. Imagine, because I don't know he's sitting box seats at the Apollo. We get in the box seats, and there's me and my childhood friend with our wives watching Stevie Wonder and Earth, Wind, and Fire, and we just jamming, man. People get the concert, we just doing it. And instead of people watching the show, a lot of people watching Denzel because he's singing all the lyrics to all the words and doing, I don't know what they think that celebrities are different from the rest of us. They are just people who have a little bit more money and a lot of publicity.
right.
They're just like you and me. And over the years, I had to find that out because, like everybody else, we all are in awe of celebrities. Oh my God, that's so and so, that's Jay. Oh my God, it's Beyonce. They're just like you and me. They talk about the same stuff we talk about. They just live in a different world financially.
Right. So you and Denzel are tight, huh? Or at least friends.
Well, since we were, I've known Denzel since he was 9 years old. I was his counselor, and when I at the Southside Boys Club, I was the summer counselor, you know, always hustling. Denzel was a little boy, one of my campers. And over the years, we came, as a matter of fact, he was at my wedding. I was at his wedding when he and Pauletta got married. He did me a solid, hosted an event for the Apollo for me. They couldn't get him, so I just picked up the phone and I got him. You know, he did me a big solid for the Apollo's 75th anniversary. Yeah.
Wow, I can dig it. Now I got one more question as
Yes,
far
sir.
as your history of what you've done with and for the Apollo and personally, and then I'm gonna move on to a quick quiz
Yes, sir.
after. It's called 10 and 25. I'm gonna ask you 10 questions and I want you to answer them in 25 seconds if you can. But before that, I
Yeah.
want you to tell people how they can get your book.
Yes, sir. Well, since the Apollo Theater is not open right now, you can't come to the theater and get it, so I can autograph it for you. But there is a website that you can order the book from. It's called blurb.com, BLURB.com. And the book is called They Call Me Mr. Apollo. All right. Blurb.com. The book is titled They Call Me Mr. Apollo. It's an autobiography. It's my story. It's my journey, how I started running errands at the Apollo Theater and now being part of a wonderful team that runs the Apollo Theater. So the book was, there's a second book coming out now because a lot of stuff I didn't write in the book because I had never written a book before. So now I know what it's all about and a lot more I want to share that happened in the last 10 years since the book came out. So I'm working on something that it's going to be an eye opener. It's people going to say, "Yo, I didn't know that. Yo, for real, you know."
Yeah, I'm saying that now, and I know you
You know,
for a while. And we've been an intimate company, and I didn't
absolutely.
know, but we never had
No,
a intimate conversation
you and
like
I,
this.
that we just all had love, you know, that family connection, that you know, that brotherhood that you and I always shared over the years, but we
Right.
never got deep into the weeds about this and that and the other, you know. But you know, you know, everything happens in time. You know, I strongly believe that. There's
What is the new book coming out? I'm sorry.
I'm still working on it. I have no idea. I'm still writing. You know, I've been writing since the pandemic. You know, which freed me up a little bit of time. But you know, because I still work. You know, I'm still working at the Apollo. I do virtual tours. I do you know, presentations. I do interviews for the theater. So I'm still working. But whenever I have free time, I just, you know, put pen to pad.
So if for anybody who might be watching, how could they take a virtual tour? And if they wanted to rent out the Apollo and do their own thing, how would they go about it?
Well, if you we the as I mentioned, the virtual tours have only been done since February for corporations, law firms, colleges, whatnot. Our marketing team is rolling out. You'll be seeing a lot about it, hear about it in June about the virtual tours that the public can now come and check out, right?
Okay.
Or if you want to do something before then and you're part of an organization, you can contact me at billy.mitchell@apollotheater.org, and we can set up a time where you can see a virtual tour on Zoom. We do it on Zoom, right? And
Yeah.
it is we worked on this thing. We took some out, we added stuff in. It is such a dope virtual tour. We checked out what everybody else was doing it. Can nobody do it like we do it, you know? But we're now going to roll it out to the public, you know, and our marketing department's been so busy with other things, so they finally given me the time. And next month in June, you'll be hearing about on Facebook about the Apollo virtual tours narrated by Billy, Mr. Apollo Mitchell.
Yeah, you are the man, man. You definitely are the man. You deserve it, sir.
Thank you,
You
brother.
definitely
Thank you.
deserve
Thank
it. So we're gonna move on to 10 and 25.
you. And then
Is
25.
Yeah, it's mostly one word questions. You might be able, I'm sorry, one word answers. You might be able to do it in 15 seconds.
All right. We'll see.
Now, but before we do that, is there anything that you want the listeners and viewers to know that I might not have touched or that may not have come out? Is there anything you want to share or
Yeah,
add?
you know, this, I want to just give a shout out to my wife.
Yes.
You know, everybody doesn't understand. They see this, Mr. Apollo, they see, you know, what, but let me tell you, bro, I have a good queen, man. And and I call her my sugar wooger, right? Me and my sugar wooger have been down for 46 years. She's been
Wow.
46, we've been married for 36 years. We dated and got our finances together and made sure that I got myself right and she got herself right before we made this journey as a union, right? We knew what we were doing. We get it out of you, Billy, because you know you want to get on this ride. Get it out, you girl. Tell them you're good. You know, I'll tell them I'm good, and I think that's been a blessing from the Creator. There's been no other woman in my life, and there's no woman that can say that Billy Mitchell ever touched them in 36 years, except my wife. And I'm so grateful. So shout out to my wife, Barbara Mitchell. I love her. I adore her. She's such a powerful queen. She keeps me in check, you know, because sometimes we men, we think we all about it. My wife, all she gotta do is give me that look, bro, straighten my ass right up, you know. So shout out to Barbara Mitchell, my queen, my sugar wooger.
Well, that's good. I'm glad that you said that and you wanted to add that because that's you're showing people or men or maybe young men that are listening that that's the mentality you should have towards your woman. And if you don't have that type of mentality, don't make her your wife.
That's right, brother. And I find that a lot of marriages fail because of finances too. You know, sometimes you got to make sure that your finances are right because you won't have arguments in the crib. If your money's right, you'll have less arguments. All right. Let's do 1025, brother.
Okay, you in New York City, train or driving?
Driving.
Okay, then and now, don't matter what situation, then or now.
Now.
Okay, how do you want to be remembered? By your legacy or your loyalty?
My loyalty.
I can dig it. We went over this, but might have missed it. Your favorite group?
Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Your favorite singer?
Stevie Wonder.
Your favorite song? You probably got 100 of them.
What's Going On? Marvin Gaye.
Okay, summer or winter?
Summer.
Are you a behind the scenes guy or you rather be in front of the camera?
In front of the camera.
Fruits or vegetables?
Vegetables.
Last but not least, Bruce Lee or Muhammad Ali?
Muhammad Ali. The champ is here. The champ is here.
So once again, Mr. Apollo, Mr. Billy Mitchell, on behalf of Shanique Bird from Toxic Magazine, who couldn't make it tonight, and she allowed me this platform to introduce you. This is the Everything Old Skool Podcast. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your memories. I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge because the Apollo Theater is definitely a building that will always be remembered. And it is always, and not just Black entertainers, but entertainers, period.
There you go. There you go. And we're about to open up the Apollo Performing Arts Center, which is a few doors away from the Apollo Theater, performing with 2 small theaters that we're going to open up to the public to do productions and learn. It's coming up real soon.